Chapter 11, Organizational Communication. Our objectives: to know the types of organizational communication, understand why interpersonal communication often is not effective, learn how to increase your listening effectiveness, and learn ways to improve your communication skills. One of the activities that you have during this particular unit is to think of a situation in which you and another person did not communicate effectively. Describe what happened. Why do you think the miscommunication took place? Now, communication is basically just an exchange of ideas, of communicating ideas and intent to another person. And we'll see as we go through this particular lecture, there are many places where the communication can break down. Here are some types of organizational communication. We have upward communication from a subordinate to a supervisor or boss. Downward communication from a manager or supervisor to someone that reports to them, a direct report, for example. We have business communication. Communication whose focus is about doing business or conducting business, that does not have a personal connotation to it. We have informal communication, communication that happens not in a meeting or not in a formal situation or lecture hall. Informal meaning something like around the water cooler or the lounge room. And then we have interpersonal communication, communication from person to person, usually in a face-to-face type of environment. Organizational communication, upward communication. Now, let's look at it a little bit more carefully here. When we look at serial communication is that communication passed consecutively from one person to another. We also see at this point the MUM effect, the MUM effect, minimize unpleasant messages. The idea that people prefer not to pass on unpleasant information, with the result that important information is not always communicated. So you have some information. Some of the information is nice and good and friendly. Some of the information, not so much. But when you pass information on, you either don't pass on the bad stuff or you slightly change the bad stuff to some degree. So the MUM effect can have an impact when communication is going on within an organization. And of course, we've all heard of the open door policy that most managers and supervisors say they have, meaning that if you ever have a question or comment or concern, my door is open for you to come by and talk to me about it. Attitude surveys is another way that we have communication, a form of upward communication in which a survey is conducted to determine employee attitudes about an organization, for example. We have focus groups where you get select groups of members from different areas of the organization that you have interest in, or a cross-section of them, to talk to them about specific topics that are of interest to the organization or interest to the members of the focus group. They want to get something off their chest, for example. We have exit interviews, which we talked about in the previous session, where when someone is leaving an organization, when they are quitting or got a new job, what have you, you want to conduct an exit interview to see what their views of their organizations are, because the idea is that they may be able to provide you with a great deal more insight now that they're no longer going to remain with your organization moving on. And then we have suggestion boxes. We know a lot about the suggestion boxes. The idea is we see these boxes all over the place where they try to solicit you to come up with ideas or complaints about the organization so that they can hopefully implement them. It's a way for you to communicate somewhat non-stressfully to upper management. And then we have third-party facilitators. We have a liaison, a person who acts as an intermediary between employees and management, or a type of employee who both sends and receives most grapevine information. And we'll talk about the grapevine a little bit later. And then we have the ombudsperson, a person who investigates employees' complaints and solves problems. We also have the obvious one of downward communication, the bulletin board. The bulletin board is a place where things from the organization can be posted up there from leadership to the personnel down the chain. We also have policy manuals that serves as a way that leadership and the organization itself communicates to its members by saying, here are our policies. And then we have newsletters. Newsletters, sort of like a little personal newspaper for the organization itself, highlighting certain types of things the organization or the employees want to have highlighted. And then we have the intranet, sort of like the internet, but just for that particular organization. They have their own personal intranet that allows them to pass on information and also secure information too, such that they can only access certain information from their intranet, not the internet. Organization communication, business communication. Now, again, business communication is different from the personal communication that you have between your family and friends. And obviously, I say this quite often to many classes, is that you want to change your style of writing when you're writing for business or writing for academic purposes, as opposed to the way you talk to your friends or family. So when it comes to business communication, we have the memos, structured letters, so to speak, short and to the point normally, that requires an action on somebody's part. Telephone calls you're familiar with, as well as email and text messages, voicemail and business meetings. All of these are forms of business communication. Now, some of them require a little bit more expertise and experience to leave them quite carefully so you don't get embarrassed by some of the messages that you do leave. So let's go over some of the etiquette that we have for some of these forms of business communication. We have the email etiquette. Okay, email etiquette, you include a greeting, you include a detailed subject line. I need to emphasize this. The subject line is very important. It's telling the person that you're emailing what this is about. Now, one thing that I know that some people do, if they have received the email from the person they want to contact now, they'll just reply to that old message. Now, that can be somewhat misleading and can get that email message lost sometimes because it does not include a very recent subject line. It may include something very old, which may tell the person that this is an old note or something of that nature. So we want to make it a new email message, a message that not only includes that greeting, but a detailed subject line that is relevant to the topic that you're going to be talking about. Don't write in all caps. Delete unnecessary information when forwarding emails. Avoid grammar and spelling mistakes. Don't spend company time on personal email. You need to realize that if you're using a company email, they have access to all your emails. Everything that you've ever sent or received, most likely, they can access. It's their email account. Allow ample time for a person to respond. Don't bombard them with one email message and then 5, 10, 15 minutes later email them another time with the same request. It does take time for people to process all the emails they have as well as do the other assignments they may have as well. Now, a new thing that's happening, obviously, we're in this day and age where we have our smartphones with us, we have email, but we also now have text messages. And so text messages are being utilized quite a bit by organization. Texting is surpassing email as a fast, convenient communication tool in the workplace. Employees use messaging to broadcast alerts such as when a toxic spill occurs or worksite information technology systems are down. Employees text to schedule last-minute meetings or announce date and time changes of events. All of you are probably familiar with this. But there should be some etiquette, okay, of text messaging. Now, some of this is going to be more dealing with consumers, but some of it may be quite applicable to the internal text messaging of an organization. First, get permission to do it, particularly if you're using someone's personal line. Send during office hours, the days of which a business may be open. Be professional, meaning do not use slang or short speak or things that you normally use when you send information to your friends. Get to the point. Respond quickly. Limit the frequency of the text messages. And text messaging is not for trying to solve complex issues. Do not send, I repeat, do not send confidential information in a text. stop when asked, and end the conversation properly. Again, a lot of these pointers here are for consumer-based text messages, so a business sending something to a consumer. But some of them, too, may be somewhat relevant as well to people who are colleagues of yours, in which text messaging is something that's going on. And obviously, too, if it's something that the organization relies on quite a bit, they probably already have established or will establish their own policies for how we want to use text messaging in our organization. We also have a voicemail etiquette. Speak slowly. Give your name at the beginning of the message and then repeat it at the end. Spell your name. Leave your phone number. Indicate good times for the person to return your call. Don't ramble, and don't include information you don't want others to hear. So obviously, this sounds very simplistic, giving this type of information, but having been on the receiving end of numerous voicemails, it should be noted that people need to have some instruction sometimes about how to leave voicemail messages and make sure the key information is there, and also make sure the information is clearly presented so the person can reach out and contact you as you wish them to. Now, office design has a lot to do with communication, believe it or not. What it comes down to is office design makes it easier or more difficult at times for communication to take place with the workforce, with the workers. So we see a variety of designs out there, office designs, about how it is that we can improve communication. One way is that we don't have people all the time locked up with offices with doors and walls. That really does cut down a great deal on communication with that particular office workforce. Now, obviously, doors have a reason. Walls and doors are there for a reason. Sometimes because of the personal nature of the information, we will need to have walls indoors or some way to have private conversations with people, customers, clients, or students. So there's the open landscape offices that you see in the bullpen design here pictured. We also have cubicles as well as private offices. Now, obviously, you can think it through here that if you have a bullpen design, communication is usually going to be rather free-flowing. We normally see this if you watch TV a lot, like cop shows and detective shows. Most of those shows have sort of a bullpen design because oftentimes they're working in a team or a partner or at least a three-man team. And so it's easier to communicate with each other, and that's going to be key, communication. Research on open designs are as follows. Well, people do not necessarily like the open designs as much, so it does tend to decrease satisfaction, okay, but it does increase socialization. You can socialize a little bit more. You're more friendly normally with the people because you see and communicate with them on a regular basis. And it does provide decreased cost because you have a big, large room. You can turn that large room into one huge office. You don't have to divide it up with walls and adding doors, which will increase our costs. Office layout. Such things as furniture, desk placement, neatness and clutter, artifacts, and windows. Just to communicate here that offices do matter to people. Offices sometimes are used as a symbol of importance, of prestige, of your importance to the organization, even new furniture. So it sounds somewhat petty, but it's really not. So furniture type, desk placement, all this type of stuff can have a great deal of impact on the communication of what the organization thinks about a particular employee or class of employees. And so that should be noted there as well. And the layout can improve communication or hinder communication. So sometimes if one wants an office with a window, it's not necessarily going to be that they're going to be sequestered in a private office, but it can hinder them if the office is closed off to everyone else, and you have your nice window, but communication is going to be hurt by that. So these are things too that people think about when it comes to the nature of the work that is done at a particular office, and how often will it be required for the members of that workforce, of that work team, to communicate with one another. If it's going to be required a great deal, then maybe an open design will probably be best, like a bullpen or something in which people can stand up and talk to each other over a cubicle wall or something of that nature. Now, organizational communication and formal communication. Communication is not always formal, meaning it's not always coming from memos. It's not always coming from the business meetings. Sometimes you'll get information from the grapevine. You'll get information like gossip and rumor that may tell you what's coming down the road, or issues that the big bosses are concerned with, and the people who are the direct reports they don't know about yet, but they're starting to get some glimmers of that in the grapevine or the rumor mill. Okay, so let's look at some different types of grapevine. And the grapevine, of course, is the informal way in which communication information is being passed within an organization. So let's look at some of these. We have the single strand grapevine, and with this single strand grapevine, we have Jones telling Smith, Smith telling Brown, Brown telling Tinker, Tinker telling Evers. So it's like passing a note along in school. It's just one straight line going that way. Or you can have the gossip, where it's going to a bunch of information, where Gossip Jones here tells Smith, Brown, Tinker, Evers, and Chance. Okay, whereas Frey, Barton, and Austin are still left out of the loop there. We have probability. So we have Smith talking to Brown and Austin, who got it from Jones. Jones gave it to Tinker. Tinker gave it to Evers and Chance. Frey and Martin left on the outs there. Then we have the cluster, where we have Jones talking to Tinker, Evers, Chance, and Chance talks to Austin and Martin, and Austin talks to Brown. So the grapevine is one way in which communication can spread through an organization. Sometimes the organization may even use the grapevine to pass information out to their employees in lieu of a formal communication where they're having a meeting or sending out a series of memos. But one of the dangers is information through a grapevine can be altered. It can be modified. It can be that some things are emphasized which were not emphasized in the original message. So obviously the grapevine is not necessarily a good way to do certain types of things by passing information along with it, but the grapevines exist. One rule of thumb is the more extensive the grapevine networks an organization has, the poorer overall organizational communication is at that organization. That they have designed and grew these grapevines because communication, naturally speaking, is somewhat poor at that particular organization. Then we have interpersonal communication, the exchange of a message across the communication channel from one person to another. There are three problem areas with this: the intended message versus message sent, the message sent versus message received, and the message received versus message interpreted. Note that these problem areas, they're not saying the same thing. You intend to say one thing, but this is what you sent. This is what I sent, but that is what was received. I received this message, but the message was interpreted differently. So this is what communication really comes down to. You have the sender and a receiver. The sender encodes a message, what I want to say. Then the sender sends the message, what I say. Then it goes to the receiver. The receiver receives the message, I hear her say, and then the receiver must decode the message. I think she means. Now again, that's a big thing there. When you decode that message, you're not always going to be certain that you're decoding the message as it was intended when it was sent by the sender. So let's look at area one. Problem area one, intended message versus message sent. Think about what you want to communicate, practice what you want to communicate, and learn better communication skills. So the idea here sounds really juvenile to, I guess, to some of you, but it's really not. I'll tell you, when I was in a certain position, I had to make sure that I was communicating quite clearly to subordinates, to direct reports, as well as my superiors and bosses. So I would have to think it quite clearly what I wanted to communicate and make sure that whatever I was trying to communicate could not be misinterpreted. So you think that through. You practice it by writing the first draft of your memo, the second or third draft of your memo, whatever the case may be. And you always are looking for ways to improve the way that you're going to communicate, especially when it comes to different groups that you're responsible for leading, that some groups may have a different style of how they listen or how they hear things. So you can be very direct with one group, maybe not so direct with another group, be very forceful with one group, whatever the case may be. But you need to think about what you want to communicate, practice what you want to communicate, and then keep learning from the feedback that happens to better your communication skills. Problem area 2, message sent versus message received. You need to watch out for word choice. What are the actual words you're going to use? Now, I see this a lot when I'm reviewing essays or papers for my classes, that they may use words that may not be the best choice because that word may have a negative connotation to it that I'm sure they didn't intend, or it may have a totally different connotation which takes away from the message that they're trying to communicate, what I'm actually receiving. So the actual words used need to be considered. What is going to be the communication channel? What type of noise you may have to deal with? This is going to be, if you're going to have to go out to some place and talk with them verbally, is it going to be on the production floor? No, it might be too noisy, literally too noisy there. Okay, noise can represent anything that can distract or take away from the message. Okay, we also want to look at nonverbal cues. Sometimes nonverbal cues tell us exactly what we want, but sometimes they may miscommunicate as well. Paralanguage, how you gesticulate your hands, facial expressions, artifacts, the amount of information that's being shared. So all these things need to be thought through so that you make sure that the message sent is going to be close as you possibly can get to the message received. So let's look at some of the actual words used here. The word fine. Fine to describe jewelry, fine to describe weather, fine to describe food or sex. Okay, again, fine. What do you really want to say? You want to use a very specific word that really hits exactly what you're trying to communicate. The applicant was a female, a girl, a babe, a woman. Obviously, we know there are appropriate languages to use to describe people. The person was a female. Okay, the person, a girl, babe. These things can be somewhat derogatory. So the idea here, you need to be very cautious of the choices that you make for the words that you select in your communications. Use concrete words and ask how the other person might interpret your message. Now, this is really important. When you are sending out a message, you need to make sure that you're sending out a message that has a low probability of being misinterpreted, of communicating something totally different. So you want to try to avoid using words and phrases and connection of words together that may be somewhat ambiguous and vague. You don't want to leave it up to interpretation. So you want to be as concrete and specific as possible. So you want to avoid such words as soon as possible. That has a lot of open space there. As soon as possible. Or I'll be back soon. Or I'll be back for a while. It'd be better to say, I need to have this done by noon on Thursday. I'll be back at 11:30 on Friday to see how you're going with this process. Or I'll be out for a while. I'll be out for 48 hours out of town, so I will not be reachable. Why not be specific? Sometimes people don't want to be specific because they don't want to be nailed down to any particular course of action or held accountable for it. So you may not want to be specific, and why that may be is because you want to avoid confrontation. That you know that the thing that you're planning on doing may not be fully accepted. You want to test the water, put your big toe in it a little bit and say, can I get away with this? Or you want to avoid being the bad guy by using the mom effect, where you're not talking about something that you know they really don't want to hear. You know they don't want to hear that you're going to be out for a really, really long time, even though you know deep down that may be the effect. Now, gender differences and communication. Let me preface this with this statement. When we have these types of comments or statements here about men and women, this does not mean all men and this does not mean all women. It just means that research has indicated the following types of differences between men and women when it comes to communication. Okay? So men talk about major events. Men tell the main point. Men are more direct. They use to agree, are comfortable with silence, concentrate on the words spoken, and sidetrack unpleasant topics. Whereas women, and the research that has been done on this topic, talk about daily life, provide details, are more direct, use to listen, are less comfortable with silence, concentrate on nonverbal cues in paralanguage, and focus on unpleasant topics. Communication channels. Well, we have the oral channel of in-person, word of mouth, or answering machine or voicemail message. We have the nonverbal, and then we have the written, personal letter or memo, general letter, memo, or email. And of course, these days, we're seeing more and more with text messaging as well. Now, what is noise? Noise can be actual noise. It could be appropriateness of the channel being used. Do you want to use, let's see, a telephone to do some counseling for performance for an employee? That may not be the appropriate channel. Will it be something that will bias the individual? Feelings about the person communicating, mood, perceived motives. All these can be noise, things that can interrupt the flow of the communication. So if you believe the supervisor has a bias against you, or you have ulterior motives that you believe they possess because they want their friend or the other member to get the promotion, all these things represent noise. And noise is anything that can start to erode at the smooth flow of communication. So it's not just actual noise, even though it can be. Imagine, if you would, trying to communicate with somebody on a factory floor with a phone, and the presses are going, there's stumping going over, there's chatter, there's all sorts of factory noises, and the line is staticky too. So the notion is communication, obviously, in that scenario, is going to be rather poor. So noise is those items that can hinder the free-flowing, smooth communication that we are looking for within an organization. Now we have nonverbal cues. Nonverbal cues are those things which are not the things that are being said. They could be the how things are said. It could be how they look when they're saying these things. Now, nonverbal cues are ambiguous. Those which are quite clear and you know what they mean are emblems, and that's very symbolic representation of a particular quality or concept. For example, these days the thumb ups we know is okay, everything's okay, at least in our particular culture. Thumbs up may mean different things in other parts of the world. So we have gender and cultural differences are common. Okay, we know, for example, the nodding the head usually means agreement or yes. The shaking the head from side to side usually means no. In some parts of the world, we have a head bobble where it's like a little bobblehead where the person makes their head bobble, may be a sign of agreement. But again, these things are nonverbal, and some of them have specific meaning, but the meanings may be different in other parts of the world. But nonverbal cues are thought to be high percentage of the message received. What that means is when someone is talking to you, you are looking and observing their nonverbal cues. Everything is hunky-dory if their nonverbal cues and what they're saying seem to be in sync with one another. We tend to say, well, cool. We don't say it out loud. We may think it. Cool. I'm buying what this person's selling me here. But when you see a difference between what they are saying and the nonverbal cues they are displaying, that they don't seem to jive, then we tend to say we have ourselves an issue. I don't know if this person's being truthful with me or not. And normally, when we see uh, communication like that, when they are saying one thing and the nonverbal cues are telling something different, we tend to rely more, in our heart of hearts, we tend to rely more on the nonverbal. Because the nonverbal we normally think of is what we have less control over. We usually have more control over what we're saying, the words that we're using, but we're not as well schooled as controlling our nonverbal tics, behaviors, or communication, what they're communicating. So if there's a difference between what you're saying and the nonverbal message that you're providing, you may lean to say the nonverbals may be closer to the truth. Just thought you might want to know that. All right. So nonverbal cues are going to be including things like your eye contact, your expression, or micro expressions. A micro expression is something that happens really quickly. Okay. Again, the idea is you, for example, I'm sure you guys have seen cop TV shows where you have the detective who wants to go and make a notification to the family that someone was just found, their husband, for example, was just found. So you're going to notify the wife. You knock on the door opens and all this, and you inform her that you need to come in, sit her down, see if there's anyone else in the house, all that type of thing that you've seen 1,000 times, I'm sure, in TV shows. And then you sit them down, and then you tell them what you need to tell them. And sometimes the detectives are there, as they show on these TV shows, to see what their expression is like. Are they going to fall down and go, oh my God, or will there be a brief micro expression of happiness or joy or something of that nature? So these nonverbal cues can sometimes tell us quite a bit. Now, also included there are going to be your posture, what your arms and legs are doing at the time, what your emotions like, what are you touching. All these types of things are nonverbal cues, which can leave things open to interpretation. They can be in sync with what you're saying or what is expected to be seen or not. Okay, but they are there, and nonverbal cues can intrude onto the message, onto the smooth flow of communication. In addition to that, we also have the use of space. There are several zones of distance around any individual. We have the intimacy zone around 0 to 18 inches. And what that basically is, when you see somebody in your intimacy zone, you're usually in a really close relationship with them. Maybe they're your significant other, a brother, a close brother or sister, or someone like that. Then we have the personal distance zone, 18 inches to 4 feet, friends and acquaintances. The social distance zone, which we know a lot of these days, is around 4 to 12 feet. Business contacts and strangers can be in this social zone if you're interacting with them. We can always include now the pandemic zone, which would include 6 feet here away from individuals. But again, these social zones or these distances are important because each one communicates a certain type of relationship. The public distance zone is going to be around 12 to 25 feet. So simply by saying how close people are together, it usually can indicate or communicate to people what type of relationship they may have. Now, obviously, we should note this as well. If you're dealing with people who are from different cultures, so these zones that we have here are usually going to be westernized zones that we are very familiar with, but other zones and other cultures may be very different. Some places in Europe, if you've traveled around, you can see that they really get really close to you. They may encroach upon the intimacy zone almost and talk to you in a normal tone, and they don't know you that well. The idea is that these zones are very culturally specific as well. The use of time, being late, leaving a meeting early, setting aside time for a meeting, multitasking working while talking. These two can communicate loads to people who you're trying to communicate with, being late or leaving early. It communicates what you may be seen as thinking of them. It does prevent its own type of barrier and slash noise to what you may be trying to communicate. One of the things too that people need to be very cautious of is this whole multitasking while you're trying to have some sort of communication going on. You have somebody in your office and you're talking with them, but at the same time, your eyes are on the monitor and you're tapping away at the keyboard. That sends messages, and it can be a barrier to communication as well. Basic assumptions about nonverbal cues in paralanguage. People are different in their use of nonverbal cues in paralanguage. Standard differences among people reveal information about the person. Changes in the person's style reveal new messages. And again, I've gone over some of those types of things as well. Now, paralanguage, I don't know if I clarify what that was actually. I should have done that. Paralanguage is not what someone is saying, but maybe how they're saying it. Speaking really fast or speaking really slow. Being very loud, the focus, the intonation they provide on this. Are they rambling on? The amount of talking, the voice pitch, the pauses that they have. All these types of things come under the umbrella of paralanguage. But the idea is that we can use this, and we do use this somewhat naturally to interpret the messages that are being conveyed to us by the person who's communicating with us. Now, one of these is going to be the importance of what word you inflect, the word that you emphasize, the word that you focus on. It can change the meaning of what you are communicating. And we have an example, I think, coming up on this next slide. So what you emphasize, where you have your inflection will change the meaning. So, but I'll be saying the exact same thing, but because of the inflection that I use, where I use it, it will have a different meaning. Let's try it. I did not say Bill stole your car. 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 So each one of these statements is exactly the same, but it does not communicate the same when you hear it, depending on what word I emphasized when I stated the statement here. So it will leave open to interpretation to the person who is receiving this information. What are you really trying to say about Bill, about the car, about what you said or did not say, or you? So the idea is that it's very ambiguous when we have it done this way. So we can see how paralanguage can sort of change the meaning of what you are attempting to communicate. So Other kinds of things too, the artifacts of our office, our decor, how our desk is placed, what we wear by way of clothing, accessories, hairstyles, tattoos, the car we drive, the house we live in. These are artifacts, and they also communicate. They communicate. So let me think of it this way. Let me give it to you this way. Uh, you work for a multi-billion-dollar organization, and you have this parking lot, and your senior executives, they park in the same lot that you do, and you see that the CEO, you see where their spot is. The CEO, the big kahuna, he's worth billions of dollars, and his car is parked right there, okay, that you can walk past every day, and it is a Honda Civic. A Honda Civic. Would that communicate something to you about your CEO boss? The car that he is driving? Yeah, it does. So everything, all these artifacts, these things do communicate. It may communicate to us somewhat subtly. We may not even know what it's subtly communicating to our mind, but it does communicate. All these things are sources of information. Now, the amount of information. When we have too much information, we tend to do some things. When we have too much information, we can assimilate, sharpen, or level. Assimilate, a description of a message in which the information has been modified to fit the existing beliefs and knowledge of the person sending the message before it is passed on to others. So you receive a great deal of information, too much information to really do anything about. You may assimilate it. And this is the same type of assimilation that you may recall from Jean Piaget and his cognitive development. And he talked about assimilation and things of that nature. So here you are changing, modifying it to fit existing beliefs that you already have. You are assimilating the information. You have your view of the world. The information comes in, and you change it. When you get too much information, you change it so that it fits your world. Or you can sharpen it. Sharpen describes a message in which interesting and unusual information has been kept in the message when it is passed from one person to another. So here you are keeping the big, nifty, great bits about the information, and you sharpen them. Okay? And then we have level. It describes a message from which unimportant information details have been removed before the message is passed from one person to another. So the things which have nothing to say about the main impetus of the communication, you can just kick those things out. So now only the bones of the meeting is of the message is there, and not the unnecessary bits. Okay, so we can either assimilate. We have so much information, we can sharpen, or we can level. It's how we deal with the information put in front of us when there's a great deal of it. So the amount of information, the reactions to information overload. Well, when we do have an information overload, there are several things that can occur. We can see omission, a response to communication overload that involves the conscious decision not to process certain types of information. Or we can have an error, a deviation from a standard of quality. Also, a type of response to communication overload that involves processing all information but processing some of it incorrectly. So you get it in, it's overloading you, but you're going to process some of the stuff wrong. Queuing, a method of coping with communication overload that involves organizing work into an order in which it will be handled. So you're saying you're put in a way that makes logical sense to you, like this first, this second, this third, and so on. Or you can deal with it, escape. This is a response to communication overload in which the employee leaves the organization to reduce the stress. You're just getting too much information. This position has been overloaded ever since you've been there, and you can't take it anymore. You just opt out. You go. The use of a gatekeeper. A person who screens potential communication for someone else and allows only the most important information to pass through. We see this a lot with secretaries and executive assistants. Okay, before they get to see the big boss, you have to go through that gatekeeper, and they'll either, the way it was when I was in a situation like that, either the assistant would handle it him or herself, Or say, okay, I can handle this. Now you're done. Go away. Or say, okay, I'll make some time for you to be able to see the big boss. All right. So that gatekeeper can serve that purpose, allowing people, some through, others not, or handling it themselves. And then the use of multiple channels. A strategy for coping with communication overload in which an organization reduces the amount of communication going to one person but directing some of it to another person. So let's say before that person escaped the work and just quit the job, he went to the right supervisor, the right manager, and said, oh, I got you. So let's take your position and let's get someone else from here to handle a majority of those calls too. Therefore, the overload becomes less. It becomes more of a normal load as opposed to an overload. Problem area 3. Again, with problem area 3, this is where the message received versus the message interpreted, involving such things as your listening skills, your listening style, emotional states, and so on. So what you put as the original message goes through a funnel, so to speak, based on your listening style, listening skills, your emotional state, your biases, your personality, your cognitive ability, and then what comes out is the interpreted messages. But the interpreted message may not be the same as the original message. Okay? So, the importance of listening. 70% of a manager's job is spent communicating. This is based on some research done some time ago, but it probably is the same. 70% of a manager's job is about communicating. Now, when I had a job that I was a manager, and most of the times I was thinking about memos, I was writing memos, I was drafting memos, I was holding meetings. So the idea is that, yes, I can buy into it. 70% of the manager's job is communicating. Of that time, 9% is spent writing, 16% spent reading, 30% is spent speaking, and 45% is spent listening. Okay. Now, the amazing thing about it, though, is this. Very few schools and very few educational programs train anybody on how to listen. Yeah, they train you on writing, reading, speaking, all this type of stuff, but not on listening. And what we see from this research is that is going to be a majority of what the manager is going to be doing. Listening. Of that time, of the 70%, most of the time they're going to be spent is going to be doing is listening. So let's talk about listening skills. So here are some ideas. Stop talking and listen. Show the speaker you want to listen. Empathize with the speaker. Don't ask excessive questions. Remove distractions. For example, don't keep typing on your keyboard and looking at your monitor when you're having someone trying to communicate with you. Keep an open mind. Use appropriate nonverbal cues. Let the other person finish speaking. Try to understand what the other person means. Although I don't cover it here, but there's active listening is also a very important idea to really try to hone your listening skills, where you try to truly listen to what the person's saying. And when you do ask questions, you ask for clarification. Okay, you go about paraphrasing what they said and asking them, did I get to understand you properly? And then they can say yes or no, or clarify a little bit better. But by active listening, it is a very powerful way to be able to ensure that communication is going on the best that it can. In this particular unit, we also have listening styles. There are several surveys, I think, that you can complete to get some idea of your style of listening. So when it comes to listening styles, we have leisure, inclusive, stylistic, technical, empathic, and non-conforming. So this was research done some while ago, and with leisure listening style, the listening style of a person who cares only about interesting information. So they're in it for the leisure of it. That's what they're listening for. Is those things that they really find interesting. That it's fun. Then we have inclusive listening. A person who cares about only the main points of the communication. Stylistic. Okay, the person pays attention mainly to the way in which the words are spoken, the style. The technical listening, the listening style of a person who cares about only facts and details. Empathic, the listening style of a person who cares primarily about the feelings of the speaker. And then the non-conforming listener, the listening style of a person who cares about only information that is consistent with his or her way of thinking. Now, other factors that play a role as well are going to be such things as your emotional state. Okay, are you angry, afraid, anxiety, excitement, love? All these things will have some impact on how you're going to be receiving this message, how you're going to be interpreting this message. So we can't really ignore where you are emotionally when you're receiving information or trying to interpret what it is. You may have some biases that may lead you to interpret it one way or the other. You may be cognitively not able to grasp all the fine details of everything too that's going on, or you may be on some drugs or alcohol that will impair your thought processes and also the process of how you're going to ultimately interpret the message. So these other factors also play a significant role as well. Now, the last couple of things we want to cover real quickly here is about the written word. Writing is easiest to read when it has short sentences, uses simple rather than complicated words, and uses common rather than unusual words. In fact, I still believe that's the case too in academic writing for the most part. uh, I try to keep it as simple as possible, but again, the idea is that we don't want to try to overwrite things. Now, what we see in the business world, it's very important that we do watch this because we can write things in such a way that no one truly understands it, and we want to avoid that. So, readability. Written communication can break down when material is too difficult for many employees to read. So, we want to make sure that when we're writing something, we're writing to the level of our audience, writing to the level of the people who are going to have to use it. So, we have the comparison of readability scales that were mentioned in your chapter. We have the Fry readability graph, a method of determining the readability level of written material by analyzing sentence length, the average number of syllables per word. We have the Flesch index, a method of determining the readability of level of written material by analyzing average sentence length and number of syllables per 100 words. Then we have the Fogg index, a method of determining the readability level of written material by analyzing sentence length with the number of 3-syllable words. And the Dale-Chall index, a method of determining readability level of written material by looking at the number of commonly known words used in the document. What this is all getting to is the understanding that not everyone is going to be reading at a college level or a graduate school level or even a high school level at times. So we see that in the past, documents have been constructed like there was a Federal Aviation Administration regulations that airline company pilots association agreements were too difficult for pilots to read. The pilots, are educated well enough, and they could not understand some of the things going on with these particular documents. Corporate annual reports are too difficult for most adults to understand. One research report was able to ascertain. And then one of the tools that we talked about previously, the PAQ, the Position Analysis Questionnaire, the job analysis instrument discussed in Chapter 2, is also too difficult for most job incumbents to read. So we see that readability is important. That you want people to be able to have the ability to read and understand your document. So how you phrase things, how you put them together, will have some influence on the ability for the written word in your organization to be truly communicating, exchanging information so that it can be understood by the reader. So be aware of that.